We're going to go to the APEC VIP hotline. Cutting-edge training for the serious athlete, apecgo.com. And at APEC, results speak for themselves when the athletes hit the field. With us right now from Rattle and Hum Sports, covering the Cowboys and numerous other things, Matthew Postins. How you doing, Matthew?
Hey, Bryan. How was your holiday, man?
It was great. Happy New Year to you. How about you?
Mine was actually fairly relaxing. I just watched the Cowboys in the season 500.
That was relaxing, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
It could have been worse.
Yeah, well, true. Okay, I got it. First things first, and we've been sitting here for the last 2 days scratching our heads and trying to decipher what exactly Jerry means when he says it's going to be real uncomfortable around here for the next few weeks at Valley Ranch. And what exactly does that mean?
Well, I don't have a PhD in Jerry Jonesisms.
Thank goodness for that.
Like some other writers around here do, but what he means by uncomfortable and what I think fans mean by uncomfortable may be two very different things. This much I know. They do have some very difficult decisions they have to make, beginning with the salary cap. They're about $20 million over the 2013 salary cap right now, and that's before they lose free agents. That's before they make any draft picks. That's before they attract any free agents. They've got to find some ways to get money off their ledger before the new NFL year even starts in early March. That could mean cutting some guys. That could mean restructuring some contracts. That's pretty much what that means when you're that much over the cap. So the Cowboys, that's the first most uncomfortable thing they're going to have to do. They're going to have to find a way to get under the salary cap. And, it could be a bloodletting. It could just be a lot of contract restructuring. It just kind of depends on what direction Jerry Jones wants to go in.
So when you talk about this and we look at some possibilities of people that could be good players that end up getting cut, who might they be?
Well, Miles Austin, I suppose, is a possibility.
That wouldn't bother me at all.
I doubt seriously he'll be cut because, for one thing, Kevin Ogletree is a free agent. So let's just say you cut Miles Austin and you lose Kevin Ogletree to free agency.
That's not a loss either.
Your number two receiver becomes Dwayne Harris.
I'm okay with that, based on what I've seen so far of Ogletree, who is, I'm done with him, and Austin can't stay healthy, so, what's the point? He's not going to be on the field anyway.
It's obviously a small sample size with Dwayne Harris. At least you know what you have with Miles Austin, and certainly at this level, you want to make sure you have as much depth as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But Austin is a guy, he's good. He's due a lot of money next year. He's due a big cap figure. He could be gone, or at very least his contract could be restructured.
So if they restructure it, that means they're going to extend his contract and keep him for even longer period of time.
Well, it depends. I don't know exactly how many years he has remaining on his contract, but it could be a situation where they could restructure the amount of guaranteed money that he's supposed to get and spread that cap hit out over a few more years.
Okay.
With Tony Romo, he goes into the final year of his contract next year. What'll likely happen with him is they'll probably give him a contract extension so they can reduce his cap figure, which is about $16 million.
Wow.
Jerry made it pretty clear that Tony Romo isn't going anywhere, so he's going to get a contract extension, and that extension is going to be as much about locking up Tony Romo for another 3 or 4 years as it's going to be about getting cap space so this team can make some additions in the free agent market. Doug Free is a guy that, I have to wonder if he might be on the shopping block. He is due a lot of money, and he did not play well, and the team is coming around to the idea that Jeremy Parnell might be a potential right tackle one day.
I think I would have had a better year than Doug Free had.
I
know you laugh when I say that. And I can totally understand that, but it's hard to have a worse year than Doug Free had. Okay, the other big issue, there are two of them as far as the coaching staff is concerned. Are we or are we not going to see a new person calling plays next year for the Cowboys?
I tend to think no, and I tend to think no for a couple of reasons. Number one, Jerry Jones believes that's what Jason Garrett is best at, calling plays. He believes he's a play-calling head coach. That's what Jerry Jones signed up for half a dozen years ago when he hired Jason Garrett to be the offensive coordinator. under Wade Phillips, his belief was that Jason Garrett's play calling was his best asset. The other reason is purely ego. Who do you bring in to call plays? Do you bring in a young coordinator or a young quarterbacks coach who doesn't have a whole lot of experience and just expect Jason Garrett to hand that over? I doubt that happens. I think it'd actually be more likely to see a guy with credentials come in and be the play caller. But by doing so, you effectively take away what you think Jason Garrett is best at. So at the end of the day, I think Jason Garrett is still calling the plays come August. I think what really needs to happen with this Cowboys offense is, A, they need to upgrade the talent of the offensive line.
Yeah.
And B, Garrett needs to commit to the running game. I actually put pen to paper to it today. They threw the football about 64% of the time this year, and that percentage has gone steadily up the last 4 years. Jason Garrett needs to recommit to the running game because the 2 years that they have gone to the postseason with him as coordinator, they've only thrown the football 55% of the time.
Yeah, and they can't live like that. But then again, with that offensive line, I don't know how any play works.
Well, that has to be their number one priority. They sold out to the secondary last year because that was probably their worst position last year, and they did a pretty good job of shoring it up by signing Brandon Carr and drafting Morris Claiborne, and overall the secondary was better. I think you could see a similar thing happen with the Cowboys this offseason. I think if they're smart, they're going to sell out to improving their offensive line and their defensive line. They've got better talent over there, but they've got a combination of guys who can't stay healthy like Jay Ratliff and guys that are getting older like Jason Hatcher.
Okay, now the other thing, though, that by their answers or non-answers to the questions about Rob Bryan, do you believe Rob Bryan is going to be back as the defensive coordinator?
See, I think there's less of a chance of him coming back than there is of Garrett giving up play calling duties. I heard the same answer you heard from Jason Garrett on Monday, and it was really an answer non-answer.
Mm-hmm.
I think he appreciates the job that Rob Bryan did this year, and Rob Bryan did a pretty decent job under some really trying circumstances when you consider the amount of injuries they had on the defensive side of the football. But the fact is, this team forced fewer turnovers than it has in any year in the last half dozen years. It's not a very aggressive defense, and I think the understanding when Rob Bryan came here 2 years ago was that he was going to implement a more aggressive 3-4 defense than the one that Wade Phillips had implemented when he got here.
Yeah, and Wade was supposed to be the guy that was going to be the blitz-crazy, exotic defensive guy, and it didn't work out that way. And you're seeing DeMarcus Ware dropping back in pass coverage all the time, and I just can't imagine that Ryan's going to be back.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably 50-50. I think it might be less a Cowboys-related decision than it might be more somebody coming to Rob and saying, hey, come coordinate our defense. Because remember, a couple of years ago, the Cowboys lured him away from Cleveland, if memory serves. I don't think he was fired before he came to Dallas. I could be wrong about that. But I think it might be more of a situation where somebody comes to Rob Bryan and says, hey, come coordinate our defense, rather than the Cowboys necessarily firing him or letting him go.
Okay. Now, the question about Tony Romo, where do you come down on this? After Sunday night, I've always been a Romo defender, and I've always kind of thought that Romo is victim to what he has around him as much as anything. But, boy, it's just really hard to defend the guy after the game he played Sunday night in a win or a go-home situation where, once again, they come up empty. And while I don't pin the whole loss on him, again, it's a team effort. Those 3 interceptions were absolute killers, and that last one, that was, just throw it at the guy's feet. There was no play there.
Yeah, a friend of mine kind of said it best the other day when we were talking on the phone. He said, you know what? Every quarterback in the NFL throws interceptions. No quarterback is immune from that.
Agreed.
The thing about Tony Romo is he throws the interception at the absolute worst possible time you could think. And I think that's what it really boils down to, is maybe Tony Romo just isn't equipped mentally for those big-time moments where you can't make a crippling mistake like that. We've seen him make these mistakes time and again, in big situations. He's 1-5 now in win-or-go-home games. You juxtapose that with the records of guys like Troy Aikman and Roger Staubach, and it's clear to see why those guys won Super Bowls and why this team has won one playoff game with Romo as quarterback. It's not to say that Tony Romo is a bad quarterback. I think he's an above-average quarterback. But the one thing that really seems to separate him from the guys who have won Super Bowls the last half dozen years is he makes those mistakes when you can't make them. Eli Manning has thrown, I think, 13 three-interception games in the last 3 or 4 years, but he's led the Giants to 2 Super Bowls. It's because he doesn't make those crippling mistakes when it really matters that you not make those mistakes.
Okay, another issue, with the Jerry Jones, I'm going to make things uncomfortable speech that he had on his radio show Monday. He started talking about how he was going to go outside the organization and consult with some of his buddies to get an evaluation of the team. And my first thought was, you hired all these people that are in your organization. Shouldn't you be talking to some of those people and listening to them first? What does that say that the very people he hired he doesn't trust when it comes time to evaluate this organization?
Well, I think it'll be a combination of the two. I think he will certainly go and talk to guys within the organization and kind of get their thoughts, but I actually don't have a huge issue with him going outside the organization if that's what he wants to do. My problem is he's most likely going to call Barry Switzer.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, he's going to go and talk to, he's going to go talk to Bud that changes his tires on his car, and he's got scouts and head coaches, and he's got people in there, and it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, it's not like he's going to go to a guy like, let's just throw Andy Reid out there, or Mike Holmgren. It's not like he's going to go to these guys and ask them for their honest assessment. Frankly, if he went to a guy like Mike Holmgren and asked him to be a consultant for a year, I think that would be a fantastic move on his part. But, part of the problem is Jerry's guys aren't really pro guys. Barry Switzer's not a pro guy.
Exactly.
Frank Broyles, who, I have an immense amount of respect for, he's not a pro guy. None of these guys are pro guys, and these are Jerry's guys, and that's part of the problem. He has guys around him that, if you look at their drafts the last few years, if you look at their drafts ever since Bill Parcells left, they haven't been very good. They haven't gotten a lot of talent out of those drafts. And that's part of the reason why they struggled so much when they lost guys to injury. They didn't have guys that they identified in the middle rounds of these drafts, or guys that they identified off the street, during the period where you sign guys out of college that are free agents right after the draft. They didn't identify enough of those guys, and that's part of the reason why they struggled so much. They had to find guys off the street to play linebacker, 5 days after they signed them. That's part of the reason why. There are some guys within the organization who are very good at identifying talent, but Jerry Jones obviously doesn't have enough of them, and some of it goes to Jerry, obviously. He does not make good decisions when it comes to not only drafting personnel, but when to make those horse trading decisions, like when he trades 3 picks to get Roy Williams. That obviously had a definite impact on this franchise for a few years after he made that deal. So, when it comes to identifying personnel, nobody thinks that Jerry Jones is the smartest guy in the world. But, if he's going to go out and talk to guys outside the organization, you have to wonder who he's talking to.
Yeah, it scares me. Believe me, it scares me a lot. All right, what do they do with Anthony Spencer?
Well, the Cowboys would love to have him back. The problem is Anthony Spencer went out and had the kind of year the Cowboys have been hoping he would have every year since they drafted him. Played a great year against the run, had double-digit sacks for the first time in his career. He made $8 million because they slapped the franchise tag on him, and they can't do that again. I mentioned the cap problems this team has earlier in the broadcast. $20 million. They've got to find that money. Really, they have to find more money than $20 million just so they can sign free agents. I venture to say that Anthony Spencer is going to find the money he wants on the open market, and that he probably won't be back in Dallas in 2013.
How about Mike Jenkins?
I think it's doubtful he's back as well. I think that probably has more to do with the fact that Jenkins wants to go somewhere and be a starter, and he's not going to be a starter in Dallas when you consider they have Brandon Carr and Morris Claiborne, and both of them, frankly, I think are better players than Jenkins at this point. I think he was a little miffed by the whole trade rumors that started up in April and May when the Cowboys were supposedly contemplating trading him to Indianapolis. I think it's going to be more about Jenkins wanting a chance to be a starter rather than money.
Okay, and your column on Rattle and Hum Sports had a headline that asked the question, was this season's Dallas Cowboys 8-8 record a character-building experience or just another failure? What's your answer? Read the column, right?
Yeah, read the column, exactly. I think at the end of the day, this team probably built a little bit more character than it failed. If you compare this year to what they did last year, I think they did a slightly better job of handling adversity, especially in the latter part of the season than they did last year. If you look at the way they lost their games to the Eagles and the Giants to end the season last year, I mean, it was almost hapless, really. But if you look at the way they lost the games to New Orleans and Washington, they were in both games. They played better. Obviously, they made too many mistakes, but I think it was a bit more of a character-building exercise for this team. And if what Jason Garrett says is right in the column that I wrote this morning, and he firmly believes that this is just another stumbling block for this team, then theoretically they should be a better football team next year. But unfortunately, all you can do is wait to see what they do in the offseason. They know what their needs are as well as everybody else that follows the Dallas Cowboys. And if they address those needs and they find the right guys, this football team theoretically could be better next year.
Lord, I hope so. Because it was a frustrating ride this year. It was fun to see them battle to stay in contention, but to see the season end with 2 straight losses again in December, it's just really starting to get old.
Yeah. And don't forget, though, there's a possibility that next year we could have 7 or 8 playoff teams in each conference. So that makes it that much easier for an 8-8 team to get in the postseason. It also makes it that much harder for Jason Garrett to keep his job beyond 2013 if they don't make the playoffs.
Exactly. And also more opportunities for Jerry Jones to be miserable. That's what we hope for. That's what we like. All right. Hey, Matthew, great talking to you. Thanks very much for coming on today. Happy New Year.
You too. Chat with me anytime, man.
We'll do it. Matthew Postins from RattleandHumSports.com, covering the Dallas Cowboys on Bryan Houston Sports Radio Live on 99.3 Talk FM. We'll come back and take some of your phone calls at 903-509-TALK, 8255-903-845-9993. That's all coming up.